countdown's different on this one. Do you see the countdown?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, if you got this part of the video, you've got the live unedited edition. Home Gadget Geeks Thursday night. It's the 3rd of October. It's hard to believe it's October already. 2024, 8 p.m. in the Central Time Zone, 9 Eastern, 7 Mountain, 6 Pacific. If you've got this any other time than that, you've caught it on our live channel, and that's all right. Hang tight. This is the recorded, unedited version. We'll get started here in just a second. My good friend Dan LeFebvre is with me. Dan, welcome to the pre-show.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be back.
Yeah, great to have you. Always great to have you on there. You got plants behind you. Those are plants, right?
Yes,
that I'm seeing back there. Do you light them normally, or are they lit like this normally in your
usually more like this? Yeah, it's kind of doing a history show. I was like Indiana Jones, right? It got that kind of a kind of a jungly type vibe right to it. I thought it fit, and it seemed a little different than you see a lot of the just a tech background with the LED lights that you can see and stuff like that. And so I thought it would be a little bit different.
Yeah, I kind of run the exception as a tech show. I don't have some cool tech under lighting, gear, light, RGB lights. Yeah. It's more of a homey, there's nothing in these drawers. I mean, this is total prop, right? It was meant to look like kind of a room, a desk with a room and then I put shelves up so I can move things around. There's some books in there just to make it kind of interesting, but that's kind of, but I found over the years too, I used to have skis back here that got changed and I just put a curtain up with it. These are always changing up here. Sometimes I've got different equipment just sitting there or whatever. So kind of just makes it interesting. One of the things I've noticed, Dan, is over the years, the audience notices less. In the early days, I think folks were more in tune to what was going on in your background. And lately, I don't know, you podcast as well, put video out. Seems like those kinds of things are going by the wayside. Everybody's just kind of like, nah, I'm more interested in the content. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think a lot of it too depends on if they're new to the show. Like if there's somebody new, sometimes I'll mention the typewriter that I have back here, which I'm pointing terribly at as to try to figure it out. Things like that, right? They'll notice stuff like that. But then, I mean, after you've seen it once or twice, it's like, okay, it's there. It's just focused on the content. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it feels like audiences are changing a little bit. Like some of those obsessive things that folks used to get into about the shows, it doesn't seem to be. People don't seem to be as obsessed about the show itself. I used to get emails all the time like, well, you said this and that's wrong and this and that. Not so much anymore. Yeah, not so much.
I could see that, especially with the trend of, with TikTok and YouTube shorts and reels and things like that. I mean, if you're watching something for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, are you really noticing all the stuff in the background?
Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah. Brian's checking in. Thanks for, let's see. Let me get over to the chat here. I should probably bring that up. Brian, good to see you. Thanks for checking in. Good to see you. Yeah, it is a little different. I think podcasting, since we're both podcasters, we can talk about this. I think podcasting is going through a little bit of a shift where the audiences are just more stable than they used to be. Like, I think there's a lot of movement. And I think today folks kind of found their shows and they just kind of lock in,
Yeah.
And maybe, and I can only speak for the US, but maybe it's just because life is so crazy in the United States right now. Everybody's like, I need some consistency, I did pick up a new podcast. I've been listening to the Wall Street Journal podcast. They have a What's News. They have 4 or 5 different podcasts. What's News? It's a 12-minute, 13-minute take morning and afternoon on the news. And it's Wall Street Journal, so it's focused on market stories, not all the time. I mean, they cover the general news. And it's been kind of nice to catch a updated news podcast. They're super fast. They don't waste any time. There's no chit chat. They're just getting right to the point. Have you found any for yourself? Have you found any new podcasts lately that you've latched onto at all?
I've been enjoying. Familiar with Danny Brown? He's got a new show, the Five Random Questions.
Yeah.
I love it because it's just light, it's fun, it's entertainment. It's a distraction from the politics and the everyday. It's just a fun discussion, and so that's one I've really been enjoying lately for sure.
Yeah, that's different. I went news, which is all the politics. Ken's checking in as well. Ken, good to see you. Thanks for coming out. I went more news to, and I'll be honest, it's stressing me out a little bit. I mean, I'm like, okay, I need to listen. I want to listen to this because I want to be informed. I don't want to get in my own little bubble because I can. Yeah, but you're like, oh, I need to listen to something encouraging too. You know?
I mean, balance. It's like work-life balance. It's also politics-life balance. I think is a fair thing too.
Yeah. Well, 40 some days, I think, here in the US till we have our election, and then see how that goes. I think that we can November 5th to December or to January 6th could be an interesting time again, like we had 4 years ago. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. Well, we're not a political show, but good to talk about. Guys, thanks for coming out. Let me kick this thing off. I think we got everybody we're going to get early. If you haven't checked in yet, I saw Ken, I saw Brian. Check in the chat room. Let us know you're here, and we'll get started. Let me kick this thing off. This is the Average Guy Network, and you have found Home Gadget Geeks, show number 625 with Dan LeFebvre, recorded on October 3rd. I got to get the month right. October 3rd, 2024. Here on Home Gadget Geeks, we cover all the favorite tech gadgets that find their way into your home. News, reviews, product updates, and conversation, all for the average tech guy. I'm your host, Jim Collison, broadcasting live from the AverageGuy.tv studios here. And I'd say beautiful, but Dan, I don't know about you. You're down in Tulsa. I'm up in Omaha. You're directly south of me. They're saying 95 degrees on Saturday. It's October 5th. 95 degrees. I'm sure it's going to be warm for you guys too. What's going on? And I think it's the last hurrah, but geez, come on, right?
Yeah, it's been that time of year where I think it's been in the 90s here, but in the morning it's been in the 50s. So it'll be like from in the mid to upper 50s and then up to the 90s during the day and then back overnight. Yeah. So it's bring your coat in the morning and then forget it at work because it's too warm.
Giant temperature swings, and I don't know if we've seen rain in a couple weeks. We're super dry. There are red flag warnings going up all weekend just because it's going to be windy and hot, and that's just here on the plains. You don't think about the plains as a fire risk, right? You think about, you go north into the mountains. You think about California on the West Coast, maybe a little bit on the East Coast. You don't really think about the fire much, although. Our heart goes out to everybody affected by the most recent hurricane going through Florida and Georgia and the Carolinas. I know I've been checking in with Tony on Twitter. He is fine, but of course, lots of people have been affected by that and the weather. It's crazy times. I mean, there's some hints of Katrina in this as you think about some of the damage and some of the work that was done. So been affected by that. Of course, our hearts go out to you as well. Hope that you are doing well and everybody is safe in that. But you don't think about the fire risks here in the Midwest, but on conditions like this, I mean, those things can start and they will, I mean, they're hard to control once the prairie catches on fire.
Yeah.
It's hard to control. You guys have some fire risk down there, right?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest issues I think that we have here is not as much natural starting, but like people will actually, for ag reasons, they'll burn their fields and stuff. Yep. And then with the high winds, it just catches and goes off. So there's a lot of requirements around telling the fire marshal whether, what you're doing and everything so they can keep tabs on things. But there'll be times where I'll just be driving down the highway and there'll just be fires along the side of the highway and stuff like that. I've seen that happen a lot.
Yeah, regular occurrence in Kansas. And I know I was driving through eastern Colorado one time and they had some fires, not on purpose or on the front range, and they burned telephone poles down. Jeez. You could see the wires hanging on those kinds of things. Anyways, it's a crazy time of the year. And for all those affected by the severe weather, we hope you're safe and well. And of course, we'll post this show. We'll post it with some world-class show notes out at theaverageguy.tv. Big thanks to our Patreon subscribers. If you're on the Patreon team, thank you each and every month. That team stays pretty stable. And so if you're on it, thank you for doing it. If you want to join that team, head out to theaverageguy.tv/Patreon. And actually, Dan is on that team as well. He sponsors the mug that we do based on a true story podcast. And Dan, every time I have you on, I talk about this. This mug is so great.
Yeah.
Like,
I've got one too. I love it.
It's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
I use it for, if you haven't, it's a Yeti style. I'll call it that way. I don't think that's the brand, but
I don't think it's the brand. No.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeti style, super insulated, keeps your coffee hot. In the afternoons, I'll switch it over. Like on a weekend, I might drink Guinness out of it. I've had beer in it. Sometimes I've done Guinness and some whiskey in it. Like it's a pretty great cup. And so thanks for you do that each and every month. That's available on our Patreon page as well. Of course, you hold that pretty tight. You've done that for a couple of years now, right? 3 maybe, I want to say.
Has it been 3 years? Wow, time flies.
I probably shouldn't say that because you're like, oh geez, maybe I should stop. But,
no, it's time flies when you're having fun, right? I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. If I look at the inside of the mug and see the coffee stain and the Guinness stain that's in there, it has been a while. So thanks for being a Patreon subscriber and for sponsoring that. The coffee pour, the sponsor that Dan does, is actually a part of Ask the Podcast Coach. We do that every Saturday morning, 8 p.m. Central, or 8. No, not. What time is it? 9:30? Yeah, 9:30 Central, 10:30 Eastern. Out there at AskThePodcastCoach.com if you want to join us for that. And then a big thank you for using those affiliate links. We often post those, either the products or there's a link right on the front page to it. If you're shopping at Amazon, you head out to theaverageguy.tv, just click through that link, and that helps the show. And appreciate you guys have been doing that a lot lately, so thanks for doing that. I appreciate that as well. Well, you've heard from him already, but Dan LeFebvre from Based on a True Story podcast at basedonatruestorypodcast.com is with me. Dan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It'll be a lot of fun to talk teleprompters today.
Yeah, no, we'll spend a little time, and it's going to be more than just a product review, so hang tight. You're kind of thinking like, I'm not going to buy a teleprompter. I've got kind of a question for Dan around the philosophy of it, so hang tight for a second. I want to catch up with you on Based on a True Story podcast. Since the last time we had you on, I think you started is it this week where you're like, you talk a little bit about what's going on at Based on a True Story and what you're doing over there.
Yeah, so it's kind of a different series. So based on a true story this week, or boats this week, the concept is think of movies that have things that are going on this week. Right. So the week of October 3rd, there are movies that show events that happen this week. And a lot of history shows cover, this on this day in history, that kind of stuff. So it's a similar concept to that, but it's like, here are the movies that show events that happened this week in history. And I picked three events and then 3 birthdays. So historical figures that are in movies. Napoleon, for example, when his birthday is, he was in the Napoleon movie. And so that kind of thing. And then also I'll throw in a movie that premiered this week in history, and do started doing a little more of an in-depth kind of an overall comparison, classic style to that.
So in a show, we might get 4 movies. Like this week right now is Alexander, 61, Black Hawk Down, and The Social Network. And you might think, well, how are those movies related at all, right?
Right. So I like Alexander, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know like in 61. So this week would be the anniversary of when Roger Maris hit his 61st home run, which is the point of that movie.
Yeah,
The Battle of Mogadishu happened this week in history, which is the point of Black Hawk Down. The Social Network premiered. I usually do the release date in the US because movies sometimes have like a premiere that happens here in the month. But it premiered this week in history too. So I covered the events. The first 3 will be the events actually from this week, because movies cover a lot more than just a single event. And then for the premiere, it's more just the timeline of the movie, kind of a classic style. I used to do just a solo show without doing interviews. And so this is kind of going back to, it's just me. It's just, that kind of style a little bit more.
I like how you say historical events and premiere. That's kind of cool. on the bottom there. Last week, Turn, A Bridge Too Far, The Godfather Part 3. And then I thought a great movie, Remember the Titans. That kind
Remember
of
the
goes
Titans?
back to,
Yeah.
Remember the Titans. So great movie. You, from a genre standpoint, do you have a favorite genre that you kind of your go-to or that you really like watching?
It would have to be World War II movies.
Okay.
And I think that's because my dad was just a huge World War II fan, and so watched a lot of the World War II movies growing up. So, and there's a lot of them out there. So,
What's your favorite of that genre? What's your go-to? What can you, if you're, we don't turn channels anymore, but if you're surfing or whatever and you see it that you go to every time, you got a favorite?
Again, I probably have to go back to some of my dad's favorite movies. I think a lot of it is maybe the nostalgia to it, but movies like Midway, the 1976 movie, or this year actually I'll be covering for Pearl Harbor. I'll be covering Tora Tora Tora. That's another just classic film.
That's a good one. It's a good one.
Yeah. So
that's a good one.
yeah.
Did you like the new Midway? The new Midway? Was it called Midway?
Yeah, it's called Midway. I've also covered that one on the show, and it does a good job. The biggest difference is the new Midway tries to do a lot more. So it tries to set up a lot more of it. So it does show things like Pearl Harbor and that aspect too, like why Midway happened. Whereas the classic Midway movie, I mean, it does a little bit of that setup, but it kind of focuses more on just the event.
You think the audience was different? I mean, you think about when that Midway came out, World War II was less farther away than it is now.
Yeah.
Most of the population would have known, like, okay, Pearl Harbor, then Midway, and then of course, the battle for the islands would have been the very end, and of course the bombing at the end. So maybe they felt like they didn't need to. Great story. I really like the cinematography of the new Midway when they come down and they see the flaps pop out and they would you could see them slow down and a little dramatic at times. I'm sure it was, I mean, I want to vomit every time I see those. I could have never done anything like that on a plane. I just don't have that kind of constitution, so to speak. I would have been vomiting everywhere in the process. But I felt like they did a really nice job. Listen, it's really easy for us to watch those kind of movies because we win, right? Yeah, you kind of wonder, does that have a different, does it play differently in different parts of the world? But certainly I liked that new Midway. It was the cinematography and it was pretty great.
It was really good. The guy I talked to for that one, Craig Simons, he's a professor at the Naval War College, and he was like, I mean, they did a great job. He thought they did a great job with it too, and the aerial battles and stuff. And obviously, a lot of it is CG. It's not in order to be able to get that kind of stuff. But I think, and that's another element of the newer movies. Like you couldn't do that in the 70s version of the movie. It's right. So you get a different perspective, and I think it's good to go back and do that sometimes. Yeah,
you do get on that one. You do get a good in the older movies, which you never got a sense of, was those old aircraft carriers were wood. They were wooden decks, right? And I guess I never really even thought about that. And you watch some of these movies now, and the recreation of some of the armament and the munitions, and then the ships themselves are just in such great detail. And again, some of that's CG, right? CGI, but it's done so well. You're thinking those aircraft carriers, wooden decks, and you just think, wow, that is crazy to think about that.
It is crazy to think about, and to think, I mean, it's something that you don't really think about it, just if you're thinking of the events themselves. And I think that's one thing I love about movies portraying those things, is it gets you to think about stuff like that. Like when you see the carrier get blasted, a huge hole go through, I think it's the Yorktown, a huge hole get blasted, and then to repair that, you don't really think that, okay, they're repairing it, and it's not like they're putting on all this layers of armor, and now the carriers, they have the system that'll have the water go off. You see pictures of that kind of stuff where they have the fire suppression systems and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, they didn't have that then. It's a little different.
No,
Yeah.
no. We toured the Missouri in Pearl Harbor when I was there, and I think it's the Missouri. Is that right? That's the museum. I think in Pearl Harbor. It's the
There's the
USS
Arizona.
Missouri.
I know is
That's
the
sunk,
one that's
right?
sunk, and then I think
I think it's the Missouri that you can see. It's been quite a few years now. But yeah, you walk through some of those old ships and you kind of just go and Ken alludes to this in the chat room. He says some of those old military ships are available for tour like museums. Very amazing and very interesting and very, very low tech.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were shouting down some of the radio stuff was down a tube.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, wow.
It's like playing with paper cups when you're a kid, right?
Yeah, no, right on. No, it's pretty incredible when you think about that. I often kind of wonder, I think so in the 80s, we were 30 years away from World War II at that point. Let's say 35, maybe 40. Well, then you think it's 2024. We got 20 more years away from 9/11. And you kind of wonder what will be the mystique, or what kind of things what will movies have? Will we be making movies about Fallujah, the 03 invasion of Fallujah in Iraq, and some of those kinds of things that we would, and will we have, what will those 40 years past, what will that look like? And what will we be doing with that? So it's just kind of amazing to think that we're still too close, but we've got a ways to go to get there. So it's always changing. Do you think, CGI, you cover a lot of movies. CGI's, a lot of movies are heavy in that. Very few are practical effects. Although it's hard to tell anymore, in what you see or what you talk about, have we gotten to a point where that it's unseen? Some of those special effects are unseen now.
Oh yeah, I think so. So my background before podcasting or anything was in visual effects. So that's kind of how I got into movies. And there was always a story from one of the VFX artists that worked on Gladiator, the original Gladiator. He would joke about how people would complain, that the tiger looks fake that when it comes out to try to attack Gerard Butler.
Yeah.
And they used a real tiger. Like the Coliseum around him was all fake. Like they did all that in CG. I mean, they used a real tiger in comparison. They used animatronics when he got closer, but they, like, the part that he was talking about was, he's like, they would use a real tiger for that. And so they didn't even notice that they had to rebuild the Roman Coliseum in CG. So the best stuff is the stuff you don't even notice.
Yeah, it's gotten really good. I think post-pandemic, in a lot of the movies I've seen, I think about pre-pandemic and the Avengers stuff, right?
Mm-hmm,
That was, I always think of the Avengers as a pre-pandemic kind of phenomena. And you still kind of, you were on that very edge of it, right?
Yeah.
And then some of the movies I've seen lately, wow, you're like, and I think about the processing power that we now have on some of these things. Then, I mean, movies that came out in 2019, let's say, those were really produced in 2016 and 2017. We're a ways away from that now. I mean, we're getting close to it being a decade away from those times. And some of the movies I've seen lately, you're just like, wow, this is pretty incredible. I'm having a hard time telling.
It's funny you mentioned the processing power. One of the I covered the Jurassic Park movies. I talked to Jack Horner, who was the archaeological consultant on all of the Jurassic Park movies from the very beginning, and he mentioned something I didn't even think about. It had to do with the processing power. The reason why the dinosaurs looked like reptiles in the original Jurassic Park was because computers couldn't handle feathers back then. It just took up too much processing power. Also, Steven Spielberg wanted them to look more scary and stuff, so they made them reptilian, even though they knew at the time that they probably had more feathers. They're more related to birds. But then in the movies after that, for continuity's sake, they had to keep them the same because they came from Jurassic Park. The dinosaurs were cloned that way, so they had to have them the same. But then you'll notice in some of the more recent, the Jurassic World movies, they actually have some feathered dinosaurs in there because now we can actually have the processing power to do that. And I just think it's interesting how movies, they use what they have, but sometimes that actually does affect. And everybody thinks that dinosaurs were what they are from Jurassic Park, right? When no, not really.
Yeah. Yeah, it could have been completely different. And maybe T-Rex was just a big chicken. Yeah.
I'd still be terrified of a chicken that's tall, that's that big. I mean, to be fair.
Right on. Right on. We certainly have seen, it's been interesting since I was a kid, and I think we've come a long way in that space of understanding that, that age. And it's so funny, our view of dinosaurs in a time frame because of Jurassic Park is so narrow, like in what the dinosaurs were and what they are. But you kind of think I've always had this idea now that we kind of say, modern day chickens are kind of a long time cousin away from them. And you're like, did T-Rex just have that and it was just the wimpiest thing. I mean, sure, it was eating everything, but it was huge. Well, certainly a different time and a different place, but it is a, with movies and what you do based on a true story podcast, movies are in an interesting spot, and they're making some really good ones. And I feel like we're getting more originals now. We went through that superhero era and everybody was a superhero, and you follow it better than I. Would that be correct, or do you think we still are stuck in a rut of recreating some of the same stories over and over and over again?
I think there's always been originals. I think that they've surfaced a lot more because they get marketed by a lot of the different streaming platforms more than, like, you think of how many movies do you watch now on streaming as opposed to when you had to pay to go to the theater every time. It was a more special event, or remember going to Blockbuster and you get 2 or 3 movies, and as opposed to now you can watch countless movies all the time, right? So I think that really has affected a lot of it. There's always going to be, movies are always about making money, and so there's always the business side of it, and so they're always going to have the superhero movies and stuff like that, because even if the movie doesn't just breaks even, then you have all the merch you have. I mean, Disney has mastered that flywheel, right, of all the merch and everything else that just is a printing money, basically.
No, for sure. Although I think it's slowing down a little bit for them. But Joe out in the chat says modern CG is overused in movies, in his opinion.
Yeah.
I do. What I have noticed is movies made for the big screen, right? They're going to come out in theaters. They're getting some, I don't know if you can hear Sarah giggling behind me. My wife is giggling behind me right now. She's in the other room just laughing away. The movies for the big screen are getting the proper attention, but I think we have some movies that are going direct to streaming. And that CG is a little like that production, and I could be wrong. It seems like it's a little lower budget. Like you can kind of see, like there was that, that one about time travel where the future calls back. I forget the name of this. The Tomorrow War, I think.
Oh, it was the Tom Cruise one, or no? That was Edge of Tomorrow.
The one where the future calls back to the past and says we need resources.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, I know.
I think it's called the Tomorrow War. I think it's called.
I remember that. Yeah.
And you want that to be really sophisticated. Yeah. And in some spots it is, but in other spots you're like, oh, that's good. But I think that went direct to Netflix. I think that was one of those. And I think we might have some Prime. I've watched some Jack Reacher season 2, and there's some spots in that where you kind of go, ooh,
yeah,
oops.
Well, you think of it's people making all that stuff, right? And so, like anything else, you're going to have budget constraints, you're going to have time constraints, and if you have all of those things and you're also trying to make a Sharknado look real, which is hard to do anyway, and then you're like, oh, we need this done next week. it's not going to look good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Right?
no, right on. Or, hey, this is all the money we have.
Yeah.
Figure out how to do the
Yeah.
production, get it processed, get
Yeah.
it done, crank it out of here. And it's fine. And actually, we think of Joe as saying, Sharknado.
Yeah.
You know what? The bad CGI in there may have actually benefited the movie and stuff because it's
Yeah.
become kind of a cult classic, right?
Sure.
And so some of those movies, right, take on this you're like, "Oh, that's so bad, but it's so good, and I can't stop watching it because it's so bad," right? I mean,
Oh.
some of those movies take on that weird,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
100. Oh yeah.
yeah.
And I mean, they called it Sharknado. I mean, come on, you got it.
Right,
They
no,
knew what
right.
they were doing, right? And then what did they up to? 8, like Sharknado 8. I mean, really,
Yeah,
like they know what they're doing. But that actually, that company, I think it was Asylum Effects that did that. So they did a lot of the sci-fi original stuff. And when you're doing visual effects for TV and you're on a TV schedule, it's so different than a movie. I mean, movies take like 4 or 5 years to make. When you see the Marvel movie at the end and that list of people, right? All those people to make that. And then you watch the credits at the end of a movie like Sharknado, it's not that same long list, right? And you have to make it in a lot shorter time. And you're competing with people who just finished watching the Avengers on TV or something, and then they watch this. So it's tough. I mean, yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff out there for sure. But how it is.
and it's in the sci-fi space, you think about those, like Battlestar Galactica, the
Mhm.
newest one. You think about, Stargate, some of those. You think about, what was the Josh, oh, Firefly. Think
Oh,
about Firefly. There's some amazing space movies that came out. These are all pre-pandemic, early. Like this is 2005 to 2015, where the graphics for the space scenes are actually they still hold up.
yeah.
They're not the Star Wars, today Star Wars doesn't hold up, the original. You look at it, you're like, I mean, it was amazing for the day, but you're kind of like, oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
But I think some of those sci-fi television programs from that era still hold up pretty well. I think they still look pretty good. I don't know. Your thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, no, I think so, and I think a lot of that is the creativity of the people making it to know what can we do with that technology and the time that we have here. So, like the space scenes can look great, but if they had the same sort of Foley CG characters that they're trying to animate in every single scene, they're not going to have the budget for that, and it's not going to look as good. So they know that okay, we can't have like where are the limitations that we have, and a lot of that boils down to the creative side, which again, movies being business, you get into how many times you hear like the Zack Snyder cut of the speaking of superheroes with
Yeah.
Superman, right? Like the studio made a lot of changes of what was actually going to be in the movie, and so
Yeah.
that happens a lot too. And it's not always the director that has creative control over things.
I think what was crazy about the Zack Snyder cut of
That was Dawn of Justice, right?
yeah, or the one that brought Aquaman and Wonder Woman and Superman and Flash for the first time. It was
Mhm.
anyways, and Batman. They made 2 versions, right? He
Mhm.
started that and then Josh Whedon finished it, right? I think. And then they went back and did a Zack Snyder cut and a Zack Snyder cut. And the colors are all different. And
Mhm.
you think, that's just color layering. I mean, bring the digital prints back in, relayer the colors, and you can change Superman from being colored in the Josh Whedon, he's red, white, and blue. In the Zack Snyder, he's completely black in his outfit, right? In his costume. And so you get this different, like, it's amazing they could go back in there and layer all those colors. Now that
Mhm.
can't be cheap. Right? I mean, there's got to be I'm sure there's some computer processes that do that for you, but it's all compute, right, to make those color changes.
Yeah, usually they're shooting in RAW, so kind of like you shooting a RAW photo. So you're going to have a lot of control over the colors. And of course, you can layer stuff on top. If you're actually changing something like the color of the costume, then you have to rotoscope out that person, kind of basically extracting them from the background in every single frame. That's usually what you give to the intern. That's the job that they get to do. I mean, realistically, that's usually what it is, right? You're just going frame by frame, literally, 29.9, well, in NTSC, but so it is a lot of work. It is a lot of work for sure. It's just,
it's incredible what they can do. I mean, I just think of that. And then yet we're getting more and more, we're talking about 4K and maybe 8K here in the future. And yet I'm watching everything on this screen that's right next to me here. Or Sarah's watching it in the living room on 1080p.
Or this screen right here. Right?
No, right on. My daughter is on her Mac or we're on our phone.
Yeah.
And it's, as we've gotten better, it's the things we're watching it on have gotten smaller. And I guess that's okay. Maybe in the VR space, all that stuff blows back out and is, you get that full resolution in the VR space. It's so close to your eyes at that point. You can get some pretty amazing resolution out of it. So
I think something that you're really seeing with that is even in how movies are made. Like in Mandalorian, they premiered a lot of that with ILM invented the technology that's used a lot now, where they basically use a game engine to put up huge screens around the actors. So then you can put them wherever you want to. You don't have to actually build sets. And so you think of I don't know what the crazy resolution has to be on those screens in order to do that, and the processing power in order to be able to do that kind of stuff. But it's changing how movies are made even now too, or series in that case.
Right. No, right on. It's an incredible time. There's some interesting things with it and different. I mean, for the longest time, people have been saying, movie theaters are dead. And yet they're going to die. And yet you go and people are paying $15 a ticket.
Yeah.
And $25 for popcorn and something to drink. Right? You're like, do you go to the movies much? Do you go out to the theaters much? And what
Not really. A benefit of doing a history show is that, like Midway, right? I mean, it came out in the 70s. Tora 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 came out in the 70s, but the topic is still relevant. I do, if the movie is worth it, like if it's something that I think is worth seeing on a big screen, because I don't even have a 4K TV at home. So, if I want to watch something that's worth it, then but it has to be worth it. And that's tough. Not everything.
1080p I'm looking at right now. I've got a 2K monitor sitting next to me here. Good enough for this distance and this space and what I'm doing. If I want to go full screen on the 2K, it works out great. I could probably the next monitor I'll buy is a 4K. They're getting cheap at this point. Man, I was in Walmart the other day and there's a giant TV, $498 or something like that. You're just I was kind of thinking like, I bought this, for $50. I bought this 32-inch, LCD screen. Good enough, 1080p. It's just for the deck, right? I take it out and set it on the TV mount on the deck. But the other day I was thinking, I could put a 50-inch out there for like $300.
Be like one of those digital billboards on the side of the road that just lights up the entire.
I have to get a whole new mount for the thing. It wouldn't be big enough, I think. To clear the space. And those things are so light. I carry that 32-inch TV now that I have that I bring it in. I don't want it outside at night. I feel like it'll last longer if I just bring it in. So I bring it in, but I literally put it under my arm like a book. I take it off the hanger. Super easy, Visa mount on the back. It's just got two holders. You just slide it on the mount. It just sits out there. It looks great. Works perfect. We're just far enough. I don't need it. I don't need it that much bigger, but it's a huge temptation. When the Walmart's running them for $299, I get a 50-inch for $299, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think then I think you're right, hit the nail on the head. It's more than just the TV though, because then you have to, is the mount going to work for it? What else do I need to change around this? There's those other factors that you have to put in, and it ends up being, sometimes a little bit more than $299 if you have to redo
No,
a lot
true.
of stuff.
No, true. Yeah. In this case, I've got wiring out to it, and I just need an extended mount to get
Okay.
it done. So another mount. But then I think like I use it 12 times a year. Do I really need, I watched a football game out there the other day. Some Sunday nights we watch Sunday night football out there, and I have a Bose wireless speaker that I plug into it, and it's great. It's 32 inches, but I've got a space out there. It sits on top of an 8-foot railing, and a 32-inch TV on top of an 8-foot railing looks kind of small, out there. I got some space to fill up in there, so it's a total temptation. I say that, and then I'm like, I listen, I don't need a 50 or a
Yeah.
52. I don't need, no, but I kind of do.
Wait till Black Friday, and then we'll see if that temptation just overcomes if things
Yeah.
get so cheap.
Well, you mentioned Black Friday. Ken or Brian says, I remember a Black Friday at Walmart around 2010, waiting in line hours to get a 42-inch TV for $500. Yeah, 1080p. So much more. You get so much more for your your money now. And Kevin says the theater near my son's college has been showing summer blockbusters from the past. He really enjoys seeing Jaws on the big screen. And that is, the local theaters are doing some of that in the summer, where they're bringing back a blockbuster from like Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
Star Wars, right? Where they bring those back. And it is a different experience, right? To see that digitally remastered, right? Because this isn't film anymore, right? These are digitally remastered. But to see it on the big screen, I am always surprised. I think I saw Star Wars on the big screen, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe 15 now. It still holds up really, really, the original, A New Hope, still holds up really, really well on the big screen. And you're like, this is great. So there are some of those movies that do that, right? They kind of hold up.
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's going to depend on the movie too, but you think of, just the times being different. The filmmakers know that you're mostly going to be watching the movie on a device here, and maybe if it's going direct to streaming, maybe it has a limited theatrical release, but for most people, it's going to be watched at home. And so they can take advantage of that, or cut some corners here and there or something like that, in order to kind of know that it's not going to be on the big screen. And then again, boils down to being a business. Where can you cut corners? Where can you save costs?
One of the cool things, I'll say this, and then we'll move on to we're going to talk a little bit about teleprompters tonight. But this has been a great conversation. I hope folks have enjoyed it. But we went to our local, here in Omaha. We went to the orchestra, our orchestra, the Omaha Orchestra, and they played. I think we saw a Harry Potter movie, and I want to say we went and saw an Indiana Jones one too. Of course. John Williams, right? Those I think, well, maybe not Harry Potter, but any of the John Williams movies, right, have these amazing orchestra, and so they played the movie on the big screen, and then the orchestra played the entire music part. It was incredible.
That's cool.
Yeah, it was super incredible. If you ever get a chance to do that, if that comes to your town, or they're doing that there, it was $30, $40 to go see this. It was a nice night at the, here at our local music hall, and it was super cool to have them supply the music for the movie itself. It's fun to watch the conductor do it, and it's up on the screen. It's incredible. It's just
$30-$40. That's cheaper than just going to the theater these days, just to see a regular movie, right?
That's true. That's true. When you go to the symphony, the Omaha Symphony, you can now they have bars out. And you could take cups into the. We have a brand new, very nice. I shouldn't say brand new. It's 10 years old, but very nice symphony now. So yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a whole new experience, and you almost forget you're watching the movie, and then you almost forget the music's live. It's super cool.
That's cool.
Super cool. Yeah, wow. No, it's super cool. Well, let's talk, Dan. Let's transition a little bit. You had pinged me, and I got talking about teleprompters, and I've got to, before we dig into what you got. I've got kind of a general question
Mhm.
for you, and I kind of want your opinion on this. And I think the tech community that follows this podcast, it might be thinking about this as well. In that, the community here webcams are not a new thing to this community. We probably, for anybody listening to the show, they probably adopted them early. I mean, I remember thinking I had a webcam way back in the AOL days, and I was
640 by
begging
480
people.
resolution. It was great.
Yeah, no, right on. It was horrible, but I was begging people to connect to via video with me. Like, I want to see your face.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh no, I'm keeping the camera off. But it did work. This would have been late 90s, 98, 99, maybe 2000, somewhere in there. And so those are, none of that stuff is nothing new. But I think as we've got into the age through the pandemic, and everybody's got cameras, and now got a lot of podcasts that have turned themselves into video, right? Video podcasts, however you want to call that. There's a whole
Whole other
argument
discussion.
about that, right? We won't get into that. But there's been this idea of when you're on camera, looking at the camera, or you lose engagement with people. Now, I
Mm.
come in on the side of that. If we're in person, I'm not even looking at you, to be honest. My eyes are all over the place, and I'm looking over your shoulder, and I'm distracted by something off to the side, and I may not make great eye contact with you in person. But there's been kind of this movement of like, hey, if you're going to create, and you create videos for people to buy, and educational type videos and such, that if you're not staring right at the camera, you're losing people. I'm interested in hearing what you think on. Do I have to be looking? I mean, my camera's right here, right? Do I have to be looking at that 24/7 while I'm doing podcasts? Your thoughts on that, Dan?
No, I don't think you do. I think it's the same sort of concept of eye contact in person, where it definitely can help. And I think I think the challenge is there are some people who will get distracted if you're distracted, and so helping them engage a little bit more, and you're having eye contact, and you're having a conversation directly with them. It's a similar concept of, do you say you, speaking of the listener, instead of hey guys, that kind of thing of everybody, right? It's the same sort of thing. Is that distracting? Nah, I mean, not necessarily, but maybe for some people. And I think the tricky part when you're broadcasting a podcast or something is you kind of have to hit everybody. And it's, at least for me, I think I prefer to use a teleprompter, to have the eye contact. You're on a teleprompter right now, to be able to look directly at you.
You're
And I
seeing
just think
me.
it's nice.
So on the teleprompter that you have right now, you have the camera behind it.
Yes.
But you have me on the teleprompter. And
Yes.
listen, we've
Yeah.
had teleprompters since the 70s. So
Yeah.
these aren't new,
No.
right? These aren't new things that I mean, they really became popular in the 80s for politicians doing speeches so they could look like they were looking around and whatever, right? Introduced, maybe TV has been using them the longest as far as newscasters reading
Yeah.
through. So not a new technology. I've often thought I have pretty squinty eyes, like I don't
Mm.
open my eyes all the way, so you can't really even see where I'm looking anyways in the most case.
Yeah.
So I've always felt like I've had an advantage, like, oh, okay, I can kind of look anywhere and nobody will notice. But so what I hear you saying is, yeah, even though maybe, I mean, when I talk, like right now, I'm thinking about something, so I look off to the left. That's a really common
Mhm.
thing that I do. I look off. Is that bad? I mean,
No.
in we're making a podcast, but in a regular conversation, is that bad? I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
No, I don't think so. And I think it helps you tell the story a little bit more, right? So especially in a podcast, you're trying to tell stories. But if I'm thinking about something, I'm looking off here, but now I'm back here. Okay, now you can tell that, I'm back to talking to you as opposed to off thinking about something, right? You can kind of use that in your storytelling, and the little subtleties like that can help with engagement, or making people feel like they're part of the story and following the story a little bit more, I think.
You're doing this as part of the podcast tonight. We're talking about it, so you got to run it. If you were doing a work meeting, do you think having of looking at the person or the group that you're talking through a teleprompter? Do you think it's just as important,
I
or
don't use a teleprompter for my work. When I have meetings, I don't know. I don't use a teleprompter for that.
yeah.
It's overkill at that point. I think most of the people don't even have their cameras on. So
Really? We get some at Gallup, we get some pretty good usage of the cameras.
yeah.
Now we had a cybersecurity training meeting today, and so the whole company, it was a learn at lunch. You could kinda just come and hang out.
Mm-hmm.
We had some conference rooms joining in, so some people coming in live from conference rooms. We had people at home and a whole bunch of variety of things. It was hilarious to I was watching everybody else on camera, and I think we're kinda to the point where people have forgotten that they're still on camera. Like,
Yeah.
"Hey, your camera's on, right? I mean, we can see you. We can see your face. We can see your expressions, right?" I think we're getting to a point where people are forgetting that they're still on camera.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, we all remember the stories of, during the pandemic when everybody was at home, all
Oh,
the
yeah.
different Zoom calls of people flushing their toilets and things like that, right? As
Yeah.
similar concept with
Yeah.
the video, you forget it's on.
Yeah, you kinda forget it is. There's been a couple different technologies that have come out. There's I don't wanna say it's plexiglass, but maybe it is, where you would put it on top of your monitor and it would
Yeah,
come down in the middle, and so it would be transparent or translucent.
yeah.
Whatever. And there would be you could set your camera on that. There have been some webcams that have a extendable arm that you can pull down your screen and put in
Mhm.
front of something. At work, I've used a Manfrotto clamp and a Manfrotto arm to put the camera on top of, and then you can set it in front of the monitor so that it looks like I'm looking straight ahead at that point. Here in the studios here, I've got my camera just sitting right on top of this monitor, so it's
Mhm.
looking down on it. So there's been a couple varieties of trying to solve this problem. One of the interesting thing, Dan's about all those things of putting your camera in front of a monitor is at some point inevitably you go
Yeah,
to look around you,
yeah.
like something gets in the way and you got to look around it, right? That's kind of the problem of putting your camera out
That
in front of a monitor.
I used I think the plastic one that you're talking about, Plexicam, I think was the brand that I actually bought one of those to try it because I was like, oh, this would be a good solution. I don't have to get a whole teleprompter. And that was the issue that I had was even though that's clear, my webcam isn't clear. And so I would have to continually like move things around on the screen or like,
Yeah.
figure out how to position all the different windows so that I could have um, whatever's behind the camera not be of importance, but then I wasn't looking at the camera, so it defeated the whole purpose because I was looking over here on this side of the screen or something. So it was like,
Yeah.
I didn't use that end, but
Yeah. Yeah. You say you didn't use it for work, but I actually think that can be a more, you think you're talking to your coworkers, you're doing some things, that may actually be an environment where making eye contact or having that straight ahead
yeah.
presence. We listen, we've all worked with those guys or gals who talk to you the whole time like this, like
Yes, yes.
they're working and you're trying to have a conversation with them
Hmm.
because you're on their monitor right over here, right? And then
Right.
but their camera is right here
Yep.
and you're like, and it is a little off-putting, I think, uh,
It's like, are you
to
actually really
have
paying attention to me right now?
yeah, I don't
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth because I think sometimes it doesn't matter where I look, but yet if I got a guy that I work with every day, and he's got me on this monitor over here, and
yeah.
it doesn't put me off, but, it's kinda like, "Can't you just move me to the other monitor?"
Yeah.
You know?
I could see that. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
for when I have meetings and stuff like that now, I have a MacBook and the camera is right there. So it's not
yeah,
perfectly, but it's close
right,
enough.
yeah,
Um, I used to have a boss who would not allow any sort of technology in meetings because he didn't want, even if you're taking notes on your phone or a laptop or something like that, it looks like you
yeah,
can be distracted. And it's like meetings are very expensive. We have everybody's salary in one room at a time. It's
yeah,
very expensive. If you need to take notes, there's pen and paper and got really good at that. But so I think, a lot of it also is kind of reading the room,
yeah,
what's, is it, if it's off putting, then I
Yeah.
think that's kind of an example of some people prefer that eye contact.
I don't think this is resolved in a lot of ways. I think
No.
there's still a lot of divisions around what people want. You mentioned this a few minutes ago. You join a work meeting and many of the cameras are off. Like
Yeah.
people don't we did such a great job during the pandemic of connecting with each other during video. And then I don't want to say as soon as it's over because we're a couple years away from it now. But a lot of folks are like, "Yep, I'm just going to turn it
Yeah.
off." And some leave it on and it's, it's just fine. But others were kind of, I want to say we're backsliding, but there may be some backsliding that's going on.
I
Right.
think context matters too. Personally, when I join meetings now, a lot of it's screen share. So somebody's, sharing their screen anyway. And so the people are just this little teeny tiny box over here on the side. Right. So do they have their camera on or not? I'm not really looking at them anyway. I'm looking at the
You're looking
so,
at the
but not all meetings are
PowerPoint.
that
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but not all meetings are that way. So I think it kind of depends, and that's okay
Mhm.
too. I don't think there
Yeah.
has to be an all-in-one solution. I don't think there is.
Right. I prefer actually meetings. I mean, this has become such a common phrase. Let me share my screen. And, right? Okay, we get in here. "Hey, let me just share my screen." And that used to not be as common, I think. We used to go into these kinds of meetings. Heck, even showing the PowerPoint was in a video conference wasn't as big of a deal. Now, in all the meetings I go to, they all have some kind of PowerPoint. And then at some point, if there's a demo, somebody will say, "Well, let me just share my screen." And we
Yeah.
switch over. Okay, everybody's seeing it. Okay, let's go. Boom, we're off to the races. And I actually find that to be really, really helpful. I mean, I think we've gotten more comfortable with that over time. So much so, and I think it's a Windows 11 feature now that if you when you are in a Zoom meeting or if you're in a Teams, I think it's in Teams. If you're in a Teams meeting on Windows 11, if you go down to the taskbar down below and you just hover the share button, where it shows the screens you have
Mhm.
available to you, the share button's right there.
Oh,
So you
okay.
don't have to go into the app anymore, say share screen, this screen, I need to find this thing, right? You just go down to the taskbar, grab the screen that you want, hit share screen, and it shows right up. So I think our meetings may be getting a little more sophisticated that way. And Dan, I think we're getting more used to it. I just don't it doesn't it do it that used to be, you remember 10 years ago, pre-pandemic, sometimes it's like, "Hold on, let me share my
Yeah.
screen," and it would be
Yeah.
5 or 6 minutes later, right?
Yeah.
"Okay, how do I do this? Oh, what's going on here? Why isn't this working? Why can't I see
Mhm.
it?" Right, right.
That reminds me. I mean, completely a tangent, but when I was a kid, my brother and I used to play Age of Empires all the time, and it would
Yeah,
literally take us like 8 hours to figure out how to remotely connect. This is before Steam, before it would take
right,
us
right,
all day just
right.
to figure out how we could get on the same network tunnel to get Hamachi. I think was what we used a lot, way
Yeah,
back
oh,
when.
yeah. I haven't
Um,
heard that in a long time.
yeah, I mean that tells you.
Yeah,
But then
yeah,
by the time we figured out, it's like, well, I don't really have time to play now. like, like we just
yeah.
spent the whole time figuring it out, and now you can just hop on, right? It's everything's changed. Yeah,
Well, half the battle was just getting connected, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
thought it
That's
was
what it
super
was.
cool, and then you're like, "What do we do now?" I mean,
Yeah,
we're connected, what do we actually do now? Get this done.
yeah.
Ken, Brian out in chat says, "No matter how many Zoom style meetings, inevitably, we still have" you're muted.
Yep,
Uh, you're still muted, and,
yep.
you see the person behind the scenes, they're frantically trying to find their mouse
Yep.
and get unmuted. One of the things gadget related is I've gone to headphones for work that you bring the microphone down and it's
Mm-hmm.
unmuted. It's muted. I mean, it's
Oh.
unmuted. You put it up, it's muted.
Oh, that's
It's
cool.
this Yeah, it's a really nice we are buying those standard now. And the Jabra ones that I bought or that were issued right before the pandemic, I don't think had that feature, but we've gotten some other Sennheiser. I think it's a Sennheiser brand, but I think most of the new ones now put them up unmuted or muted, put them down unmuted. Dan, that's a really nice way to not like there during the pandemic. There were some features like a red button you
Yeah.
could plug your headphones into, and it would be green or red to kind of prompt you, "Hey, you're on mute or you're not."
Yeah.
I am finding that up and down movement actually very beneficial in you go to meetings and you're like, they don't need to hear what's going on. Flip it up, it automatically mutes itself. That seems to be working really well.
And I wouldn't be surprised if that was a direct result of a lot of those Zoom meetings. I mean, that became a thing, right? Everybody, it's still a thing, but I mean, I'm sure that the people designing the headphones are like, hey, what if we just fix this for them and do it so easily, right?
It works out. It works really, really well. And I'm even my habit is join the meeting with video and audio muted, and I put the headset up, and then turn the video on, and then wait for whatever's going on, and then when I'm ready to talk, flip the microphone down. And that's just in a meeting today. There were 9 of us, and it was very this group of people, they do not wait for anyone else to talk. Right? They have no presence. They don't look at body language to see if somebody else wants to jump in. And it was just nice to be able to flip that thing back and forth and kind of stay out or stay muted during those times. So that's a technology on those headsets. I have an Audio Technica BPH1 that I use as a headset when I'm working here from time to time. It doesn't have that, and it's I'll just throw it up so they don't hear me breathing, when they're coming in, because sometimes I would be working away and I'd hear them come in, and then my breath would change. And they're like, "Oh, I hear you breathing," and you're like, "Oh, sorry. I mean, geez," but it works out pretty well that way. You picked up though this teleprompter, and that you're using for some of the videos you're creating. Talk a little bit about what you got and why you got it.
Yeah, I've got it right here. I can show. It's the Elgato Prompter, right?
Hold on. Let me get the right screen. No, that's not the right one. Here, this is the
getting used to
right
there we go. There we go. Yeah. So it's simple, right? You have camera back here, and then the little screen that's built in here. And I got it because I have another teleprompter here that's kind of pieced together. So it's the prompter is separate from the monitor. The monitor I bought separate and all that. And I got the Elgato because I was like, oh, it should be plug and play, pretty much is what I assumed it would be, something like that. And it was not. It took a lot of setup to get it to fit with my, I think the biggest thing. So I'm using this camera here, and they have a mount that you can put on, right? But no matter what, the lens is too big.
Yeah,
so I'd have to buy a whole new lens, which I'm not going to do. This is like $1,000 lens. I'm not going to do that. I already had it laying around because I do photo and video stuff. So I had to figure out solutions, and I finally got it to work, but it ended up being pretty much the same amount of work as the piece together prompter that I'm using here. But with that said, the software that they have is really nice. I do like that. I also got the pedal for it, which was one of the reasons why I went with them, was because they have this pedal. So this is going to allow me to then, while I'm on the screen, this is under my foot, just like on TV, right? They have something to control the actual prompter itself. So I can do that with the pedal, and I'm not fiddling with the computer and all that kind of stuff.
Tell me again, what does the pedal do?
This it's a Stream Deck basically, but it's a Stream Deck for your feet, right? So it has 3 different buttons on it. You can program whatever you want. But I'm using it, so they don't have scroll speed yet. I asked them, and they don't have actual speed to speed up and slow down, but you can play pause, so I can pause it at any time, the prompter as it's going, and then you can rewind a little bit too, so it'll kind of go back a little bit. So it actually works really well to be able to control what is on the teleprompter, as with your foot, so you don't have to be like fiddling with the computer and figure out what you're going to do. So
Elgato also makes the Stream Deck, which are those programmable. Sometimes they have 15, sometimes they have 30, sometimes they have 1,000 different buttons you can push that do different actions on it. I'm going to show that again. I put it on screen, but then I didn't feel like I was doing a very good job of clicking the buttons here. Still new on the interface. I'm assuming, is this the one retails for $249?
Yeah.
Is this the
Yeah.
right one?
Yep.
It says built-in screen for YouTube, Twitch, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and more. I don't think this would be a bad if you got this set up and you got used to it, and you were doing a lot of Teams work or Zoom work at home, and you just set that up in front of your workspace. You wouldn't try to do work off the teleprompter, but it
No.
wouldn't be a bad thing, right? To have you said you already said to me that you wouldn't use it in a Teams or in a work situation, but you could, right?
Yeah, I could. And once I get it like fully set up, I mean, I might just because one of the reasons why I bought this one separate when I already had one is because I have a different setup for the podcast than I do for recording instructional videos and such. And I wanted to be able to just sit down and record. I love being able to just sit down, record. Everything is set up. I don't have to fiddle with everything beforehand. I have done that too many years, and that's a pain to do.
Yeah, no, it's really nice to step in and just do it, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so, I mean, I guess if I have that, I could do that with meetings too. One thing is with the camera. So with the camera that I have, it's a 28 to 75 lens is what I'm using just because with my space. The prompter does have to be a little distance away. So I don't, for the shot that I want, I guess I should say, for the shot that I want, because I want to be able to see a little bit more than further back than the shot that you're seeing in this one here. I have it set up a little bit differently. So with that in mind, it might be a little hard to see if somebody's doing a screen share, on the interface or whatever they're doing, depending on what they're presenting. With the teleprompter software, it's easy because you can change the font size, and that's super easy. So, the distance is not that as big of a deal. But yeah, I guess, you could for sure.
How big's the screen on that?
I don't know. It has the specs on it, but I think it looks about the same as the monitor that I got for the teleprompter I'm using here is a 7-inch one. And it looks about the same as that.
So
Probably
7 or 8 inches. I think this has been for me. Okay, I have a 34-inch curved screen that I'm on right now, right?
Yeah.
And so I have half of that. So that's a 17-inch, basically. Let's just say it's a 17-inch monitor. I'd love to have a teleprompter that is not 8 inches, but that almost is. And I'd almost, what I'd really want, I think this is what I'm waiting for, is a transparent screen. So like where I have a full, curved wide screen, and part of it, it'd be great if this was transparent. It was displaying what we're seeing and the camera was just sitting right behind it. The one of the things, I don't know if you've seen this yet. I see this with Dave. Dave Jackson's been using a teleprompter on Ask the Podcast Coach. And sometimes because the camera's going through the picture, I see a little bit of that in the camera. Are you worried about that at all? I mean, it is still going through light to get to you, right?
It is, yes. And the interface does matter some. So there's two key things when you're working with a teleprompter to help with that. One is the light leak, which I don't have it with me, but on the back here. So when you attach the camera back here, basically just like a black bag type thing, black fabric that you put over it in order to cover that so that no extra light leaks in. That's where some of that can happen. And then also, honestly, the interface, like if you're using a bright interface, sometimes that'll do it. But then I just use like if I'm using a browser, like browsing, recording like this, I'll use a dark reader type thing and just invert the colors, right? And that gets rid of that.
Well, last time you were on, you and I talked about StreamYard, and they're bright at the time. They're bright white interface right now. They've since launched, and we're using Restream.io now, and they have a dark interface. StreamYard has gone now offers with their new pricing plan a dark interface, but that can make a difference as well, right? I mean, those screens were just bright white.
And that was where I noticed it really initially, because when I used StreamYard, because I switched, I used Zencaster before that, and they have a black interface, and I switched to StreamYard, it was white, but I used just a dark reader extension in Chrome to invert it, and that fixes it for that particular one. But yeah,
What's interesting about Restream is it's not black. It's kind of a bluish, like, right? I mean,
yeah.
I don't know if that's my setting, but it looks kind of bluish dark. Now that's fine. I'm getting a nice color off of it at this point. I kind
I
of
think it's
really
dark
like it.
enough
Yeah, I
that
think
it's
so.
not going to affect the
Yeah,
teleprompter. Yeah.
I think so. I think so too. But that's been my only. This is what stopped me. I had a buddy. I was talking to a buddy who had just gotten into podcasting, and he said, "Hey, do you mind if I give you a little bit of advice?" And I'm like, "No, no, but pass it on." He's like, "Get a teleprompter." And I was like, okay, well, but I don't know if the teleprompters are where I want them to be yet to get what I want. I don't want a separate, I guess is what I'm saying. I don't want a separate device.
Yeah.
And maybe we're a long way away from transparent monitors where it's a piece of glass that the image
Have,
comes up on.
not to get political, but have you seen
Yeah.
any of the speeches that they have? They have teleprompters that are clear, basically on
Oh,
either side, right?
okay.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I don't know what
You're
they
not you're
cost.
not getting political, by the way.
Well,
This is still technology.
right, but if you look at some of those
Yeah.
wider shots, now they're not shooting the camera through them necessarily because
Right.
the news cameras are all over the place. But if you pull back those like transparent things,
Yeah.
that's their teleprompter that they
Yeah.
can read from.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm sure they're not cheap though. It's
no,
not
for
something
sure.
for your meeting
For
at home.
sure. Yeah. I think when we get to a spot where I can have a transparent monitor, then it's just easy to drop the camera behind
Yeah.
it and oh, okay. Although that being said, Dan, let's go off the rails for just a second. What we may get to first is instant AI correction of my face, and you and I are having this conversation, and I could put a setting in the computer that says, no matter what I do, keep my head facing forward and my eyes staring on the camera, and change me in real time so that I'm always looking. So I'm not so
You
that
see, the script is doing that with their eyes. They've got the
yeah, right.
eye change thing. I think that might actually start to get a little creepy because if you do look off and you're thinking,
Yeah.
and then now it's like my face is this way, but my head is not right. I feel like that might start to get a little bit creepy.
A little uncanny valley. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
no. I
yeah,
think I think we have to have more, like, we were doing some eye correction stuff. That's not new. It's been around for a couple years.
mhm.
But I think we're gonna have to actually do more full face and body look that kinda corrects the whole thing so that if I do something like this where I'm looking off to my right, I don't actually look off to the right. It's got plenty of content for me to this
Yeah.
point of what I look like. Even though I look off to the right, it keeps me looking forward and it keeps my eyes looking at you. The trick is, how do we do that without it looking too CG?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Looking too weird.
I mean, I don't think the technology is there yet to do
No,
that sort of thing in
I
real
agree.
time, but maybe it's something like the mic, right? Where it's a setting that you turn on or off. And okay, if the mic is down, or
Yeah.
maybe, there's a button, like the foot pedal or a switch or something, be like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to be looking over here. So I don't want it to do that. Turn it back on when I'm looking this way to make sure
Yeah.
that it's really just adjusting little bits here and there. Because I
Yeah.
think that would be easier to do just a little bit than to try to do a full facial reconstruction looking all around. um, just
Yeah.
a little bit.
What would be interesting, so I just took a drink of water while you were talking, but if I had a button on on my Elgato Stream Deck that said, Make me look still," and I hit that, no matter what I do, it has me, it's not totally still because that's super creepy. It's not I'm not blinking because that's even more weird, right? But it puts me in a natural state of sitting here, maybe moving around a little bit with my eyes blinking normally and maybe taking a breath or 2. But I could, while it's doing that, I could go off and, take a drink of water and never look like I was away from the microphone, so to speak, and then come back to it and say, "No, I'm live now, so I'll pop back in." I do think we can start doing stuff like that. I don't know. I don't that's what I'd want.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that. I could see that. I mean, is there what's the downside of somebody being able to see that you're off a little bit, or even
Well,
just turning off the camera and being like,
that's true.
I'll be back, or that kind of thing. I
Yeah,
think
just yeah, go ahead, sorry.
I mean, I guess in order to be a business and do that, there has to be enough use cases for it. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that maybe we're not quite there yet, to have that sort of need, universally across the board. Right. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
nice to have, but
Right. Right.
yeah.
I just think about some of those folks in the space who have kind of said, hey, you got to sit still, look ahead of the camera, be professional,
Mhm, mhm.
for some of those kinds of things. Now,
Yeah.
I'm a less than professional, I think, in some of the things that I do. And listen, some of us appreciate that. We want, we kind of want that style. We're not interested in straight ahead or super pro or making
Yeah.
sure everything's buttoned up. Last week I talked about 11 Labs, and
Mhm.
I'd done a voice clone of myself, and then I had done a speech to speech, and it's hard to tell the difference between the two. I'm just kind of wondering, Dan, if I could create a podcast like you and I are doing today, and then say, go through and clean that up and make me sound not only the words that I use, take out all the fillers. Descript can do that today. Take out all the fillers, smooth out the video, make it look like I'm looking at the camera all the time, but in a comfortable kind of way, not an uncanny valley, kind of weird, undead kind of thing. Um, I that may be the I don't know, that may be the next step in some of the video. I mean, imagine if you were making a learning video, like where you're teaching something,
Mhm.
and that maybe is important that you do that, and you can just create that kind of on the fly, and then let AI clean up all the sound and the
Yeah.
video and make you look good in the process. I think that might be worth it. What do you think?
I think so. I think this is something that I've kind of thought, just my personal thought on a lot of these cleanup tools with AI, and kind of the direction that they're going. And some of this kind of leads back into my background in visual effects, because one of the most difficult things in visual effects a lot of times is to make something look realistic and not make it look like it was computer generated. So you're adding a lot of that wear and tear. You're adding a lot of that. I know like 11 Labs has even started adding in breaths, right, to make
Yeah.
it seem more human. And I think if we start to take a lot of that away, and more people that do that, you're going to have people that are using it way too much and going extreme. And I think, especially in my case, being a podcast and entertaining, people are going to want that human element. I've even started in some of my videos, I've started introducing some mistakes, right? Little things that took extra time to do, but it was something that, it was actually a mistake that happened in this case. My cat jumped up while I was recording, and I left it in the video, right? And I turned it into a fun little bit about it. And like, you could take it out, but I think it adds a little bit more human to it. And as more and more people use AI, especially to do things like that, because I think that sort of technology does have a place, but I think people will start to overuse it. And then you'll have some people that are wanting more human.
Yeah. 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 Well, I remember when I moved into the studio, we built a brand new, during the pandemic, Gallup built me a brand new studio. And this had been in the plans before any of that stuff happened. And I didn't get back to it until July of 21. And I remember doing a podcast out of the studio, and the audience who had been with me live a lot, our live audience kind of is the same people all the time. And they love to come out live and they love to listen. And so I'm in the studio, and it's got a super pro background. I have a gray, it says Gallup, Gallup,
Mhm.
Gallup all over the thing. They're like, what is behind you? Is that a green screen? And I'm like, no, that's real. And they're like, oh, that's ugly. Get rid of where's your more personal stuff?
Yeah.
Where's your office? I had done it out of my office. I had done it out of a temporary office. I done it out of a conference room. And they kind of wanted the more realistic, they kind of wanted to connect on a more human level, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. No, I don't want it perfect. And listen, I come at this from a viewpoint of I'm not a perfect guy, in the sense that I'm not looking for the most professional. I'm not looking for the most polished. There are people who are, and that's fine. They can do that. But I come at it from a more normal, that's not the right word, average, since
Yeah.
this is the
Average guy,
average guy
home
dot
gadget
TV,
geeks,
right?
you expect a home. Yeah.
Yeah, just the average, like, "Hey, we're just kinda doing this thing,"
Yeah.
and so maybe it's a preference. Listen, I've talked to folks before, like, I mentioned this buddy of mine who was like, "Dude, get a teleprompter, you're looking all over the place." That bothered him.
Yeah.
To you? Nah, it's fine, you know,
Yeah.
and for me, it's fine too, so maybe it's just a preference thing. I don't know.
I think a lot of it is. I mean, I think a lot of it's preference, and I think um, the more tools that are available, I think those preferences might change some. I mean, we were talking about the screen sizes, right? What people prefer for the screen to watch something has changed as technology has changed. And I think that's going to be the same on the creation side and on the editing side, and even as some of those things get into real time with, in meetings and stuff like that, and you start to see some of that, you're going to have, again, I think there's I think it's going to be the people that use it way too much, like people that are adding the backgrounds and the virtual backgrounds and doing all these extra things and stuff like that. And okay, it's fun, but when you do it on every single meeting, and it's ends up being okay, maybe it's a little bit too much.
Well, virtual backgrounds have their own problem, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it creates that we've seen all the ones that come standard with Teams or come standard with Zoom, or the blur, the very popular blur, and I people jump on them like, turn that thing off. I care nothing about what's behind you. In fact, I'd prefer to see the real place that we're all real people, right? And I'd prefer to see well, I don't want you to see well, then clean it up. If you don't want me to see it, but I'm fine seeing it if that's what's there. I don't get too caught up in that. But what I think what I've learned is that's not the case with everybody. I mean, I work with some folks who are like, "Oh, the background you have at home, that's not really the professional, but look that we're trying." Okay, well, I thought it was fine, but that's your preference. I'll continue to go into the studio and do some things that way. So that's the tough part, right? Expectations.
Yeah, and I think those expectations are different for different brands. I mean, your brand, the average guy.tv, Home Gadget Geeks, in a very, gray background, I can see, okay, that's not a usual person's home, right? But in a corporate setting, I can understand that they want a brand to look different, and not like somebody's home. Okay, that's fine. They're different.
Yeah. No, right on. Well, anything as you think about what you got there, anything you're going to use that? Is that going to be for what you're doing? Is that going to be a go-to going forward? You think it's going to stay around?
It's going to work great. The only thing I don't like is the arm. That's the only thing that if I were to get it again, I would not have purchased this. And that's just my scenario. The C clamp on the bottom of this is too big for my desk. It doesn't have enough surface space. Right here. This space here. So my desk lip only covers about half of this, which means there's not enough there to be able to hold my heavy camera and the tripod the prompter and stuff like that. So I had to find another solution around that. I just use a light stand with a little adapter on it myself, but
it didn't come with a desk mount where you could drill a hole in the desk and drop the mount.
It just came with the C clamp.
Yeah, this is one of the things when the Rode, I think I have, what do I have here? Rode PS1. I think that's what I have.
I have that one, and that one actually works on my desk, which is why I thought it would work with the Elgato.
Yeah.
But the size is different.
It's this is the Rode PS1. Mm-hmm. And originally 12 years ago, it used to come with a desk mount where you could drill a 1-inch hole and then drop that in, screw it from the bottom, and just put it right in there. But I'm noticing now those kinds of fittings aren't coming anymore. It's just a clamp.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, there's only a few spots on my desk here where I could clamp it on, and not all desks are the same and not all clamp right.
Right.
I've got one at work that's got this rubber edge on it, and for whatever I do, I can't get that thing far enough in to get the clamp just right, And then you move this around, it's a little tight. It starts wobbling, and pretty soon you have the thing just tearing the desk to shreds.
Right.
That clamp does.
Or falling over, which is not what you want when you have the teleprompter and camera and everything attached to it.
No.
Which is what I ran into, but yeah.
Yeah, it's the most of the clamps, as I look here, I probably have 4 or 5, maybe 6 clamps on my desk. They all do pretty well, but there are some times on the cheaper things, or maybe in this case, where the space that you like, even on this desk, it doesn't have a lip all the way around it, right? There's some spots where the lip disappears.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I tested it on a different desk that I have in another room, or actually just a table, and it does support the weight then when it's all clamped in. But the desk that I'm using in my office, it won't work with it. So it's like, okay, it's not really an issue with the arm necessarily. It's just check the measurements.
Yeah, and we even bought a clamp for one of the cheaper arms where the bottom piece to put it on was not wide enough, so it was digging in to the desk, and like, oh, we got to get a washer on there, or we need to get a plate on there, or we need to get something. One of the things I've started keeping in all the stuff that I buy, sometimes they come with extra plates or extra clamps or extra holders, and I throw those in a drawer just because you never know. Okay, I might need that for something else. So
that saved me here. I used a lot of those different little adapters, or even something that kind of surprised me. The pedal and the prompter are USB-C to USB-A is the cable that comes with it. So in order to work with my MacBook, I had to get 2 adapters. Thankfully, I already had them. But little things like that, where it's just like, I just assumed that it was USB-C, and I assumed that the cable would come with it would be USB-C to USB-C.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that'll change in the future, but just little things like that.
Yeah. Well, Dan, an interesting conversation, not necessarily around the piece of tech that you have, but the idea around looking at cameras or webcams, or what are we doing with that? What's that space look like? I don't think we've innovated. Yeah, the teleprompter's been around a long time, right? But the combination, I think, for most people, of a webcam and a monitor, I don't know if we've saw using a 70s technology. Listen, that teleprompter is old technology.
It's not new.
It's just a mirror, right? It's a mirror, and the screen is on the bottom, and it's reflecting on top, and you're showing through it. I think we have a little ways to go on that. Either one, with the webcam or the computer fixing us in real time as we're doing it, or I think shining the cam through the through the monitor, or nobody's talking about this, but a multi-camera view where you have 2 or 3 cameras looking at you from different angles, and that's blending it into a single one that is then giving you the best possible overview of what you're trying to do. That could easily be, I mean, you could easily do that in a monitor where it's got it on the top, the side, and the bottom, and then blend that picture together as you're doing it. Maybe not today, but there may be a time when, we get to something like that where
you thinking like a mocap type rig like they use on movies, like with Bullet Time, where they have the camera. I mean, there's a bunch of series of cameras that they went around.
Yeah, well, or I'm thinking I'm just thinking of it getting multiple shots of you from all around, and then blending that into one to one thing, so that it no matter what it's getting tons of data on you and what you're doing.
I mean, that's basically what 3D scanner does. Right. Yeah. Getting the point cloud, and then you basically just be creating a 3D character of yourself in real time. It's mimicking everything that you're doing. Is the tech behind it, Yeah.
Well, that's what the iPhone does, right? I mean, we have multiple cameras on the back here, and it can do multiple things with it. Whether those, might be, it's funny. We haven't seen webcams come out with multiple cameras yet. We've got them on the iPhone. And I could, with the latest iPhone update and with Restream, every time I connect to Restream, it wants to connect to my phone. It sees my phone.
It did for me too.
It sees it as a camera. And I'm kind of thinking, I'll just throw the phone up there like this, and have it. Ooh, that's kind of creepy that it's just showing me in real time that way. Right? That was weird. That's kind of strange. Anyways, yeah, but that kind of I'm thinking with multiple cameras that way where it's got
Mm-hmm.
more data to choose from. It's got different angles to choose from as well, and then blends that together to get a kind of a perfect
Yeah.
image of you, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, I wonder
Whatever.
what kind of processing power that would need because in order to blend all that kind of stuff together, that would. I mean, we got
Yeah.
fast computers now, but I don't know if they're there yet.
M4, Mac M4. I imagine it could. Well, we always say that, and then this stuff just keeps getting better and better on those
Yeah,
kinds of things.
that's true.
We don't even think could 15 years ago 4K. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
That was
right,
impossible, right?
right.
Impossible for what we're doing.
Well,
Dan,
you think of computers way back in the 80s and 90s too, right? You're like, why would you ever need 1K of space on a floppy drive, right? Why would you ever need
yeah,
a full
yeah.
megabyte? What?
It
Yeah.
wasn't that long ago we were connecting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's
But
amazing where we've come and what we've got and the things that it can do and the things that can anticipate for us. And I'm just kind of thinking, messing around with 11 labs. I'm also kind of thinking, yeah, it's so I can train it with a voice print of mine. I can give it, why couldn't I give it some video that
yeah.
it then creates a persona of me that, yes, it's going to take a lot more space, a lot more time, and a lot more training. But why couldn't I create a persona or you know, it's not an icon. What do we call those
The
things? An
avatar.
emoji? Avatar.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. An avatar of me that's nearly lifelike that just does its thing. The ones, listen, we've got this on Zoom today, but it's a cartoon.
Right.
I'm talking
Right.
about something that actually looks like you.
Well, yeah, and I think that's how that kind of thing starts. I mean,
Yeah.
look, I mean, we're talking about movie technology, right? And back then, it was very different than it is now because the technology has evolved, and it starts with cartoons. It starts with the
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
emojis and avatars and things like that. And as
Yeah.
things get better,
Yeah.
I mean, it's only a matter of
Yeah.
time.
And then I say all that and I'm like, yeah, but or I could just be live.
Yeah.
Works out just fine. In fact, we may get to a point someday where live is novel and the the animated or the CG or the
Mhm.
what AI, whatever you want to call it, is so standard that when you actually get to talk
Yeah.
somebody for real, that's novel.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
that's kind of what I was alluding to, talking about like people probably going to want more human. I think that it's going to
Yeah.
it'll like with a lot of technology, it'll reach this point where everybody's doing it and everybody's trying it, and so it becomes everywhere. And then people start to pull back once they realize, okay, going way too far, doing way too much. We don't really need to do this. We can just go live, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there
No
is fun in just doing it just because you can.
Yeah. No, a good conversation. And certainly I think we have I was kind of feeling like podcasting was getting a little boring, just to be honest. Like maybe a year or two ago, I was
Mm,
like, I don't know. This is kind of wore out. This whole kind of discussion that we're having now, especially around some of the voice AI stuff that's coming out, some of the content AI stuff that's coming out. And then I think we'll see some advancements in video pieces as
mhm.
well coming. Maybe there's some interesting things, still yet to come on this where we can, like what tonight as we were thinking about this Elgato teleprompter, if I could have used an AI engine to say, "Hey, I'm doing a demo of this Elgato, create a 7-minute video for me that contains the product, spin it around a couple times, do some fun stuff with it, right? And create an AI video for that on the fly, or maybe
Yeah.
10 or 15 minutes before the show." That'd be kinda cool,
Yeah.
right? To do today, we do that with pictures. The video part of it, it's maybe there for some things. I don't know. You don't know of a service that I couldn't tell. Well, maybe can I tell an AI prompt somewhere to do that and it would do it for me?
I don't know about an AI prompt. I haven't looked into that. I know,
Okay.
I mean, I know there are some services that will do like a photogrammetry. Where you do take a bunch of pictures and then it stitches them together. But I would say for a lot of that kind of stuff, I look at the movie industry as a leader in that space because for a lot of those movies, they have huge budgets. I mean, you look at the technology that like James Cameron invented to be able to make Avatar and Avatar 2. And a lot of movies are pioneering in a lot of that technology that then some of it will catch on, not all of it, because we don't all need movie productions. But once they invent that kind of technology and that capability, it's like, oh, how can we turn this into something more mainstream in the masses and that kind of thing? And I think that's where a lot of that will be driven from to start with.
Yeah,
I think
I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but today I could say, make a picture for me on any of those AI engines, right?
Yeah.
I want a picture that is, somebody out in space with planets all around and stars. But in this particular case, I'd say create, I need 3 minutes of B-roll for a Elgato teleprompter that's over here on Amazon. Spin it around, bring it up, give me something kind of cool. And it would just kind of create. I mean, do you think it'd have enough images and stuff to be able to create a little B-roll video for me, right?
I'm sure they can. They might start to run into some licensing things. I don't know
for sure.
Specific products, but
great.
I'm
Dan.
sure you
got to get practical as soon as I.
Well, I mean, because that kind of thing limits how much of it can be used, and then whether there's a business side. I think also, I know AI has at least in photo and in video too. A lot of the stock places are having a lot of AI submissions to them, and a lot of them are accepting. And that's another space to look at to see, because if that's the kind of thing that people are wanting and needing, and somebody can generate it that way, I think that would be another place to look to kind of see where that leading edge is in what's getting generated, because people are making money off of it, and that's usually where that leads from.
Yeah, no, right on. It always follows the money.
Yeah, right? Follow the money. Follow the money. Exactly.
Always follow. Dan, thanks for reaching out again. It's always great to have you on. I appreciate it. Thanks for staying a little bit late with me and chatting about those things. Thanks for all the stuff that you do. Anything as you think about based on a true story podcast, anything coming up that you want to promote before we go?
I have an interview coming up October 15th, because that's when his book is coming out. LeFebvre, who, have you seen the movie Miracle? Disney's Miracle on Ice?
Okay. Oh, yeah.
So LeFebvre was the scout in 1980 for that Olympic team. So he was there for all the Olympics. And then he took over as head coach. Herb Brooks in the movie, unfortunately, has passed away. But LeFebvre took over as head coach for the Olympic team in 1984. So I got a chance to talk to him about the movie that he had never seen before coming on the show. So he had never seen it before. He was like, at the very beginning, he's like, why would I see the movie? I lived it. But it was a fascinating conversation, a lot of behind the scenes stuff. If you're a hockey fan, sports fan, Olympics, it was it's a lot of fun.
It's a great time. I was teenager during those days. And I still remember coming home from church when they beat Sweden to make to win the gold, right? The game with Russia was just to get to the gold medal round. I think a lot of folks think that was the gold medal round, but that was the semis to get to the gold medal. And then I remember on a Sunday they played. Isn't that weird? Those memories. I mean, that was 1980, right? Was that
80? Yep.
80
Olympics. Yep.
Yeah. And I was 12, and I still remember coming home from church. That game had been played already and was won by the United States. But certainly what's crazy about that whole Miracle on Ice would have looked a lot different today than it did then from the media coverage. Like, you could only get that game on one channel.
Really?
Right? I mean, 1980?
1980. Yeah. One channel. Yeah.
One channel, and maybe radio. But I'm kind of thinking, would they have covered that game on the radio? In those days, or could you have dialed into a local radio station and listened to the hockey game? That
maybe. I mean, I don't know from that perspective. I know in the conversation I had with Lou, he actually mentioned that for one of the earlier games, he was out scouting one of their upcoming opponents, and so he didn't even know what had happened in the game. I think it was the first game they played against the Soviet Union, before the Olympics started, the kind of an exhibition game, and he didn't know what happened until he got back to the team and talked to Herb Brooks, the coach, and it's like, how do we do? Because it wasn't on TV in every bar and and
Right.
covered everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's quite the for many of us in our age category, it's quite the moment in time,
Yeah.
And was it Al Michaels? Doesn't Al Michaels do it? Can you believe it? Was that the the TV broadcast? I think he says at the end or something like that. It's quite. I still watch that moment when they're winning that, and I get chills.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just such a pivotal time. Listen, today we've had the dream team, and we have professional athletes in the Olympics, and we don't even think twice about it anymore. But in 1980, that was such a big deal, and so
And they were college kids.
they
weren't
were
pros.
ragtag, some pretty beat up kids too, and some very talented ones. But
Sure.
well, check that out. That'll be available. When's that going live? You said the 15th?
October 15th. Yep.
Okay. So coming up, check it out, based on a true story podcast.com. And make sure if you need another podcast, I say this all the time on Saturdays. If you need another podcast to listen to or something just to break up the monotony of what you currently have, check it out, based on a true story podcast.com. Dan, thanks for coming on. Can you hang out for a minute while I close this thing up? Is that all right?
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for coming out. A couple reminders on the way out. If you want to join the Discord group, and that's kind of where the cool kids hang out. If you want to join us over there, go to theaverageguy.tv/Discord and create an account and jump in if you're not on Discord. It's not very busy. It's very, very manageable, and it's really nice people. So if you want to jump out there and join us in that conversation, you can do that. Leave a message for me if you got a topic or you want to leave a comment, homegadgetgeeks.com. Don't forget, we got Christian coming back on here in early December. He's going to be a dad here soon. We're recording dad jokes for him. So head out to homegadgetgeeks.com. Leave me your best dad joke. It needs to be 30 seconds or less. Throw that in there. We'll play those on the show in December. I think that's the first Thursday in December. And I'd love to have you hear those. Uncle Marv said, "I'm an uncle. I'm not a dad." It's okay. You can have dad jokes and not be a dad. It's perfectly fine.
Yes.
If you do it that way. Then don't forget the AverageGuy.tv platform, both web and media hosting, powered by Maple Grove Partners. Get secure, reliable, high-speed hosting from people you know and you trust. And that's Christian. I just mentioned him. For more information, visit maplegrovepartners.com, and he can do just about anything for you. And he's got still really inexpensive plans. So check it out today. We say inflation fighting, and into these days, man, inflation is kicking at this point, right? It's settled down a little bit, but going out to eat still $100, and you're like, dang.
Yeah. Those port strikes aren't going to help it at all either.
Oh yeah, that's a whole nother topic.
Yes.
We'll have to see how long those go on for. The good news is I think a lot of retailers anticipated this. This has been long telegraphed, and I think they've stocked up on some stuff. So hopefully, at least toilet paper anyway. I hope we're okay. Maybe that comes on the West Coast, and we don't have to worry about that. We are live every Thursday, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, out here at theaverageguy.tv/live. And we got a couple shows lined up for you if you want to listen live and come out on a Thursday night. Mike Uyghur is back next week, so you want to be out here for that. The 24th, Bob and Ryan are coming back. I mentioned December 5th is Christian. Then I got John Biggs lined up for the 19th of December. So lots of stuff still coming up, and love to have you coming out here and join us live. If you can't, thanks for listening to the recording as well. Thanks for coming out. For those listening live, Brian, Kevin, I saw Joe a little bit earlier, and Ken, thanks for coming out live. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody. Dan, thanks again, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for staying up late for me.
Yeah, no problem. I'd be working anyway, so I appreciate it.
Yeah,
it's fun. It's always fun to talk.
It's understandable. I don't know about you. Lately, down here watching YouTube videos, I'm doing something, and all of a sudden I catch myself fall asleep at the screen. You're like, and I'll be like, man, I need to go to bed. And like, one more video, one more video. And then you I don't know, you struggle. Do you struggle late night at all to stay awake when you're
My schedule really
mine, yeah.
varies because I do. I mean, I'm working on the podcast and
Yeah.
it's time doesn't really matter as much. I mean, unless I'm doing an interview or have something that's something like this.
Yeah.
When I'm done with this, I'm going to be working on researching the next episode, the same thing
Okay.
I was doing beforehand, right? So,
Yeah.
and when I wake up in the morning, I'll be doing the same thing. So,
Yeah.
so,
Oh, that's good. That's good. I'm finding as I'm getting older, I'll take a second, I'll take a break, I'll put my head back.
yeah,
Next thing I know, I'm just
yeah.
snoring away in the chair, and I think I have turned into my father.
My dad did that too. Yeah, I'm sure. Yep.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it's never
Yeah.
never good sleep. It's you wake up
No.
from it like even more tired somehow.
I wake up scared sometimes. I jolt myself awake and I'm like, "Where am I? What am I doing?" It is, last night, lately, I don't know why, I wake up I've been having some really vivid dreams,
Mm.
like, between 1 and 3 in the morning for some reason. No matter what time I go to bed, 1 to 3, I have these vivid dreams, and they wake me up. And last night's woke me up about 1:30, and I sat there for a second, I thought, "Welp, I guess I'm up."
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
guess this is it. I guess I'm up for the morning. I better go do something productive. So I got up, went to the bathroom, came back to bed. For a second, I'm like, okay, no, I'm gonna force myself back to sleep. Like I'm gonna do everything I can. So I got back in bed and I thought, well, maybe I'll dink around on my phone. Like an hour and a half went by like that
yep.
on my phone, right? And then finally I got kind of tired. I put the phone back. I went back to sleep. But man, I tell you what, I as a kid, I listened to old people talk about how they couldn't sleep, and I'm the
Hmm.
old person.
Yeah,
you know, Frick, I wake up at 2 and I'm like, oh,
yeah.
it's just disappointing.
And as a
You know?
kid, you're like, I wish I couldn't sleep. Like, I don't want to go to sleep.
No,
And now
I
you're like, oh
know.
man, I wish I could sleep.
Yeah. And I've been working out and eating better and doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. Still waking up in the middle of the night. So you're
Yeah.
like, and it's the dreams that for me, like during the pandemic, I didn't dream at all. Which was really,
Mm.
really weird. I don't know. I don't know what kind of cycle I got into, but I told people like I stopped dreaming. It's just not happening anymore. And then that was about a year. And then as I've been coming out of that, maybe the last couple years, my dreams have gotten vivid. And it's
Hmm.
like, what is going on in my head that is just causing me to have these crazy dreams?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I
Yeah. I don't
did
know.
a dream journal with one of my friends
Ooh, ooh.
recently, which I'd never done before, but and
Ah.
it was interesting to force myself every morning or that I could remember
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
to jot down what the dream was. And usually I was surprised how many dreams I had that I just apparently couldn't remember later on in the day, but
Did
I
you did
remembered.
you write them? Did you write them down or just speak them into something or what
I
was the
have my phone. There's
Yeah.
the Day
Okay.
One app. I just did
Okay.
that. So that actually allows you to do shared journals. So I would share it with her,
Okay.
and we would go back and forth.
Yeah.
But it was fascinating. Also interesting how many of the dreams. I remember that I had one. I remember bits and pieces of it, but I don't remember the full
Yeah.
thing. It's just little elements
Yeah.
here. So I wonder if maybe the ones maybe you're having more complete dreams and able to remember them. I don't know what the science is
Yeah.
behind that,
Maybe.
but it's interesting. Dreams
Yeah.
are interesting.
They are. They're very fascinating to me. But yeah, well, maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try because they're so vivid. I wake up the one I had last night was and I remember good chunks of it right now, which is even crazier because
Yeah.
usually those go away pretty fast. Like
Yeah.
I can see the image of this person who is supposed to be my daughter who passed away in the dream, and she had dark curly hair, and she's about 7 years old. Like, those are the kind of details that usually slip away
Hmm.
super fast, right? And even right now, I could see in my head, I can picture where I was and what I was doing at that time, right? Whatever. And so it's like, that's odd.
Yeah.
Like, why that's weird. That's never been usually that kind of stuff would go away pretty fast and you'd be like, "Hey, I can't remember any of those kinds of things." but they're sticking around. And so I don't know. Maybe it's just I kind of think it's an age thing. I don't know.
Maybe. I mean, could be
I
maybe
can,
diet too. I mean, because the brain
yeah,
is, I mean,
yeah, yeah.
it's
No,
chemicals
I
in
don't know.
there, right?
I wonder. I mean, certainly since the pandemic, I've been consuming more alcohol than I did
Mm,
pre-pandemic. So I'm wondering if that's playing a factor
maybe.
into it at all, but yeah, they're freaking vivid. It's
Hmm.
crazy. But maybe I'll try that. Maybe I'll try. It's a little weird waking up when the house is quiet, talking into the phone. So I need to
Yeah.
have to kind of figure that part out
Yeah, I never
of
did the audio part of it.
oh, you
I would
just
just jot it
type it
down.
in?
Yeah, I would
Oh,
just jot it down real fast.
yeah.
Or even sometimes if I didn't want to have my phone next to me, then I would have a little notepad. I had a little post-it note next on my nightstand. But like, remember the dream journal entry. And I would just jot it down real quick. And then
Yeah.
fill it out
Yeah.
a little bit later. I found often too that even if I jotted down bits and pieces, as I was going back to review it in the app to copy it in there, I would remember more from the notes, I guess, that I was taking of the dream
Yeah.
a little bit
Yeah.
there. But it was it was an interesting exercise. I'm not really doing it anymore, but it was an interesting
Yeah.
exercise.
What a weird thing our brain does.
I know, yeah.
You know? What the like,
Yeah.
why? Why is that? Why do we why do we do things? Why do our whatever evolutionary process or whatever,
Yeah.
right, is in
Mm.
there that gives us some kind of advantage or something. People say, it's your brain is defragging, so to speak, and moving memories from short-term memory to long-term memory or some of those kinds of things.
In my case, just forgetting them completely because just throwing it out.
Indeed.
It's your new backup system. My brain just removes,
I know.
just gets
I
rid of it
know.
all.
It just deletes. I talked about that last week
Yeah.
on the show.
Yeah, I
I
heard
just
that.
deleted the stuff. You're like,
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
need it anymore.
Yeah.
I
Hey,
I
that's
need
brave of you.
less
Yeah.
than I need less than I ever need. Well, it's an interesting thing. I'll have to think about that because it's crazy. I need to figure out for me the right way to journal that in some
Yeah.
way. Either whether it's writing it down. I'd prefer just to tell it in a story format of some kind. But even that feels a little weird just saying that to myself, picking up
Yeah.
the phone and turn it on and saying,
Especially in the middle of
"Hey."
the night, like if there are other people in the house and they just hear you talking strangely. Are you
Oh,
talking
I'd
in your
wake
sleep?
them up for sure. My wife would wake up for sure, in the
Yeah.
process. She go, "What are you talking about? Why shut up." You almost need some kind of place you can go that's I don't know.
Like a podcast
Yeah.
studio almost.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, except mine isn't as, soundproof to the rest of the house as it is. I'm fortunate that my family's pretty quiet, to be
Yeah.
honest. I mean, Sarah was cackling earlier, but, she can hear me talking, doing this. And, so it's not as quiet, but fortunately, when I started podcasting, all my kids were out for the most part,
Yeah.
so it was pretty quiet, so hey, if you're listening live, thanks for coming out. A few of you left out there. Thanks for hanging on all the way to the end. Brian says excellent show, and Brian, thanks for that. Appreciate you guys. We'll see you back here next week. Dan, hang tight for me 1 second. Don't forget, I have got who did I say I'm having next week? I've got
Christian?
Mike Uyghur. No, I have Mike
Mike. Oh,
Uyghur
Mike.
next week.
Mike's first.
So
Okay.
come out. Mike's joining me. We'll catch up with him. We'll see you guys next Thursday.